We did it again. Rank 1 for Warlocks, solo self-found. And again, we did a better tower clear than the normal mode Warlocks, making us the only class that is doing better on the solo self-found than on normal mode. And I'm really proud of that. And I really still put that down to not enough people are playing Apocalypse. They're still sleeping on it. You still see build videos from top streamers saying Lunatic is the best build for the Warlock. And it's a very, very good build. But like next reset, I'm pushing 146, possibly even 147. And I'm not sure Lunatic is going to get up there with me. So it's going to have to be somebody playing Apocalypse to come challenge me. So come and play my build, which I'm about to show you right now. So for those that actually know my build and have seen my previous video, I'm going to first talk about what's new, what's different, what's changed, what have I improved to make this 2.0. And I'm going to first start off with saying I was wrong. I was wrong. I was wrong. The Memphis set does work. In a previous video, I said it doesn't work, and I showed some sort of hastily put together proof of why it doesn't, and that made common sense. But there was a few people reaching out to me and saying it does work, and in one in particular who was someone that wrote on my latest video, and his name is Leddy. He was very persistent in saying, please test it out, check it out, I'm sure it works this way. And so when I put it on and went into actual pit and not just the dummy, I could see there was a damage increase when I would go frame by frame later in my recordings to see, yeah, actually this is a big damage increase. And even though at first I couldn't figure it out, I have now figured it out, and I know now the secret. So with the Memphis set, essentially you have to stand in damage. You're going to have to stand in damage, and then that will translate into damage buff for you. So this is really only something for a push build, because only the elites and bosses that take a long time to kill is it worth getting that damage buff for, because otherwise if you just kill everything in one shot like I do with Mephisto and all the bosses in the game, basically there's no point having this set, because they don't even really get to damage me before I kill them. And actually, so then it will be a damage loss. And even against small enemies in the highest pits that I've done in towers, I kill them before they get to damage me, so I get nothing from them. But here, when you're facing a boss for 2 minutes in a tower 144 or something like that, yeah, there you're going to get a massive damage increase by standing in the damage that they do. So yeah, that's the first one. Memphis set does work. The second one is that I full-time moved over to the Scepter. I managed to get a pretty good Scepter. It's still not the most perfect Scepter, but I got a really good one with a massive amount of willpower on here, when it translates to something like 1600 willpower just on this weapon. And yeah, it's definitely the transition and huge damage increase compared to just using a two-hander with the Heresy. And again, this is for endgame, for final endgame and for pushing. The next thing is I did some testing on attack speed. I talked about that in a previous video of how important attack speed is. I did some tests on 20% versus 90%, and it was a massive damage increase, more than 1% damage increase per 1% of attack power. I did some further testing on this to see, what about from 75 to 100? I'm not going to get into specific frame-by-frame breakpoints to figure out when is there a cutoff or anything. That's just too much work. But I did test 75 to 100%, and I still saw a 20% increase in Apocalypse cast and a 20% reduction in the downtime of power within. So the TDLR from that is that it stacks all the way to 100. You're still getting great value out of attack speed up to 100%, and it's worthwhile going to that 100%. That's why I've been able to push at these very highs, because now I have 100% attack speed and essentially 100% crit chance, because I get the 60% from the Calamity as well. So by having both of those things, I've really been able to ramp my damage to really high levels. The last thing that is different and new in 2.0 is I've transitioned fully over to a damage focused Paragon board. I no longer use greater hex for the 25% damage reduction on enemies. One of the side benefits of the Mephis set is you are much more tankable. Now, I'm going to go over the Mephis set and how it works specifically in the rest of the video. But yeah, I take a lot more damage reduction from the Mephis set. And I no longer need so much on the board. I need more damage just to ramp up because, of course, anybody that has done some sort of tower pushing or pit pushing or anything like that, they know damage ends up becoming the throttle. Like, okay, you're not going to survive every run and you're going to have to restart a lot, but you need the damage for the boss at the end and for the elites. Otherwise, you're just never going to have enough time. So those are the big changes. The Mephis, the full-time scepter, 100% attack speed, and the Paragon board. I'm now going to go over each of the gear, the skills, and the rotation. And I've had a lot of comments on my videos, and so I know the general questions that a lot of people have, and now I'm much more equipped to answer these rather than doing it through the comments. So I'll also take some time to do that as well. Okay, so for gear, actually not a lot has changed from the previous build, except the scepter, as I mentioned. So we still use the Godslayer crown. I have been trying out the Lucian, and it just doesn't work as well for all content, including tower pushing, compared to Godslayer crown. Yes, we lose a little bit of damage on the boss, or quite a bit of damage actually, but we gain so much more time to get to the boss because Godslayer just pulls everything in. It even prevents elites from splitting, which a lot of us know that can be a pain in the butt because you're trying to kill one and then you're just wasting a lot of time killing separate elites rather than they all pull down together and just nuke them down. So I still love Godslayer crown. There could be a point where I have to switch to Lucian to get going, but as you can see from my latest run, I did 144 in 7.5 minutes. I still think I've got some push there before I have to start thinking about, okay, I don't have enough damage anymore. Where can I find more damage? Okay, so we're still using the Flesh Writ Carapace and the Worldbreaker gloves, of course, and the legs with the 40% damage reduction. One little change here, you might notice I have a barrier gem in here. That's just something I've been trying out. I actually prefer it, especially because I use, in tower pushing, I use the rune and I use the ultimate, cast on ultimate, so I get a refresh of the barrier every 1 second. And as I said previously, I have to stand in fire to take damage, to gain the damage buff. And yeah, so I'm standing in a lot of damage, and having that refreshed bulwark every second really helps, and having it be, considerably larger bulwark, it really helps. I'm still using the footfalls, the scepter, of course. The Molochs is very important, and you should get the vampiric curse onto that. And then the rings are the same as well. I change my rings a little bit depending on what my attack speed is and what my crit is, and that's where I move around. So I have a bunch of rings that are, they're all kind of perfect looking rings to switch around depending on the situation of where my crit is. An example being, I got recently a carapace with crit on it instead of attack speed. So if I ever need to switch that around, I can. I then want to talk about probably the more exciting part is now using the seal, the mythic seal, with the 4 nameless set and the 2 Mephis. And of course, you'll see here, my seal is pretty disastrous. Like, I don't need that crit so much, to be honest, and Ranks and Sigil does nothing. So this seal is doing literally no damage for me compared to, say, this seal that I have, the 6 set, which is a 23% separate multiplier, plus a 10% multiplier on top of my... So I've lost a lot of damage by not using this. So I would only bother doing this if this was actually quite a lot of damage gain and damage reduction gain, and it is. So I'm going to take some time to try to talk through how I think this is working. So... yeah, we gain the stacks when the enemies die, and that again in itself is misleading, because if you read over this stack, it says increased damage based on demon pain, and it says 43, 46, and that's not true. As I showed previously, these stacks don't indicate how much damage buff you've gained, or anything like that. So I don't know why it's talking about the damage. The thing that's important here is that the 3 set says sends 2% of the damage you take to each of your demons. Now, I have generally 2 demons. I have my Soul Shard demon, and he can't die, but I know the damage goes to him. And then I often summon a Hellworm demon from my Sigil of Summons, and that also cannot die, and the damage gets redirected to him. So when I stand in fire, when I stand in the electricity of an elite group, a portion of that damage, it says only 2%, 2% gets sent to those, and then based on how much damage they've taken, I then get a damage increase against that specific enemy that damaged me. It's not against all enemies, it's against the ones that specifically damaged me that then got sent to them. And that's why it's called sadism, right? It's about seeing others take pain for me and get enjoyment out of that pain. My demons take it. I don't know, and I haven't done enough testing yet to figure out, does the bombardment demons count? Because I am taking a lot less damage, and it doesn't make sense that it would be 4% less damage. I wouldn't really notice that too much. It feels like I'm taking 10 to 20% less damage, and the only way I can fathom that, unless I've misunderstood this text, which, by the way, Blizzard, it's very, very confusing, is that when I'm casting these demons down, even though they only live very temporarily, when the damage hits me, it counts up any potential demon I have that might be flying in the air here and distributes some of the damage to them. And so at any one point I might have, especially because I'm often got a 5 stack, I might have, say, 3 or 4 demons, and right as that damage hits me, it counts, okay, he's got 1 Soul Shard demon, he's got 1 Hellworm, and he's got 4 bombardment demons flying down. Let's distribute 12% damage to them. That's the only thing I can fathom. But it is a massive damage increase by having this, especially against some enemies that are surprising ones. An example being the Reprisal. I think it's called Reprisal. The Reprisal elite affix that they put up the golden bubble and you take damage based on how much damage you've done to them. Those guys you normally hate, you try to avoid, they're like a pain, they'll kill you as you're trying to kill them. Now I nuke those guys down. Like I take damage off them because they reflect it back to me, but they just die in 1 or 2 hits, even at Tower 144. Like my damage is maximum against those guys. And yeah, so it's actually quite fun to play at the highest levels, because normally you're trying to avoid all the damage you're trying to. Now I'm trying to soak up as much damage as possible. Like, yeah, hit me with your lightning. Let me stand on the earthquake. It's quite interesting. You can still die quite easily, but yeah, it's a different play style. I will say this is only needed for tower and pit pushing. It would be a damage loss in all other content. Definitely stick with just a seal. And either the Banished Lords, which is 49% increase, or if you're doing some sort of pit pushing. Actually, even for pit pushing, I wouldn't use this, because rarely is the boss on his own. In pit, it's only in tower that all the enemies disappear. Yeah, so I'd use Banished and just use the normal 5-set Nameless until you get very, very end gear game like I have. Then I just don't bother switching off this. I'd kill everything quickly regardless of which set it is. Yeah, so that's the Mephis set. You want the 5-set Nameless. I'd like to get on a couple of the pieces, Chance to Stun, Chance to Daze, but I don't stack too much of it anymore because I actually want things to damage me, right? So if they're frozen and they're stunned, they don't get as much of a chance to damage me. I maybe even have to wait a bit, because initially you come in and you freeze all the elites and it's like, okay, I'm just doing lower damage until they unfreeze and then they start hitting me. So yeah, I'm toying around with just moving this over to resists fully. On that, it's still important to stack resists and have as much damage reduction as possible, even though you want to take damage, because you still want to survive, right? They still do crazy damage at those highest tower and pit levels. And yeah, you want to live through it. So you still want to be stacking those things. You don't want to ignore it and go, hey, let's just get down to nothing so that we take a big amount of damage and then we do a lot of damage. That playstyle is probably going to be, really challenging. Okay, so yeah, that's the gear and that's the talismans. So next I'll talk specifically about the skills. So I'm not going to go through the actual skill tree That hasn't changed too much, and you can just see it in the description link that I've posted below. But I want to talk about the skills on the skill bar here and what value they have and why we take these here. So of course, with the Morlocks, we gain 39% for every volatile skill, and as you can see, volatiles when they have the fire going around them, and we have 4 of them right now, and bombardment becomes a fire one during combat, although it does drop off and you have to be aware of that. And so when it does, it's 39% less damage. That usually comes from when you've cast it quite a few times in a row and you use up those volatile casts, but it comes back again pretty quickly. But it is something to be aware of. So I'll start first with the Umbral Change. We've picked Umbral because it stacks up the most stacks onto enemies compared to everything else. So the stack rate is very quick compared to all other skills, and it counts as an Occult and a Hellfire, both of which trigger. The Hellfire triggers the Heresy aspect, and the Occult means it can be volatile for the Moloch. So we're getting a lot of damage increase just by having it, and it stacks up fast. Bombardment is a unique one. It summons down demons for us, and that is for a lot of very good reasons. Now we need it for the Memphis set because we want to get to 100 as quickly as possible. I feel like this must still have some sort of calculation in the damage buff that we have. So by casting Bombardment, we really quickly get to 100 stack. And by the way, this 100 stack stays with us through everything except death. So even when I join a new tower run, I lose all other buffs except this one. I start with it at 100 if I had it previously, right? When you die, you have to stack it back up again, but otherwise every other content you carried around. And as you'll see here, when it runs out, it doesn't drop down to nothing, it drops down to 99. And then that goes for 20 seconds to 98. So this buff is great. It stays there all the time. I wish a lot more were like this. And again, it's at 99, I cast once, it's at 100 again, right? Even if it dropped down to 80 there, one cast of Bombardment would bring it back up. Now, we use Bombardment, it can be volatile, it's not a cult, so we're losing some damage, although not as much as when the Heresy was on the two-hander. We're using it on the ring now, and it's 14%, so we lose 14% by this not being a cult, but we gain a lot of damage through the Paragon Board, which has Demonic Spickles, which requires demons to be damaging our enemy, and we get up to 120%. We need 40 damages on an enemy or hits on an enemy from demons. That's very quick with this, as I've shown in another video. Basically in 2-3 seconds of doing this, they'll be up to 40 stacks, so you're at the full 120. And also the Fathomless, which needs 7 demon stacks to get to 105. That's this one here, and as you can see, it pretty much lives at 100 at 7 stacks, so 105% damage. Moving on, we have the Command Varlock. We keep this one. This one's an Occult, and it's not a Hellfire, so it can't be empowered, so we are losing 39% by not having an Occult skill here, but this is vital for us to have. It stacks up our Fortify every cast. It is a massive wrath regeneration of 430%, and he pays our life cost, which is one of the Soul Shard downsides, is that we have to pay with our life every time we cast skills, or at least Bombardment. And yeah, he will pay those costs instead, as well as it does a small overpower increase, which is negligible this season. Now, the thing is, one question that I get a lot: how do I stay alive? And I've said it in my previous videos, tip number one, spam Command Varlock. But I'm going to say it again, spamming Command Varlock is vitally important for everything in this build. And the reason for that is that I have no life steal, I have no life on hit. I basically only rely on Barrier for protection and Fortify for healing, as well as the potions, of course, which I try to minimize using as an emergency only. But when you are when you're in Power Within, which is on the seal, right, as I am now, I'm holding down Command Varlock. You can see the green bar down the bottom here just resets and resets because I'm spamming it. And the big value of that is it's not a damage loss. I can still continue to cast Umbral Change. I can still continue to cast Apocalypse at full speed, even though I'm spamming that command Valak. On another side aspect is over here down on my health bar. This now is full. Every cast that I did as I was spamming it, and in that power within I do maybe 10, if not more, is giving me 8% fortify, 8% fortify. It's filling up this fortify up to 100%. And because I have very little downtime on power within, you can trigger 1C here, I just fill up my fortify at all times. And yeah, so in most fights I only have a couple of seconds downtime of power within as I go throughout the whole tower. And yeah, I just am sustaining my life that way. So my number one thing to tell everybody, because it comes up the most, how do you live? I'm still dying, or I'm paying, you know, every time I cast skills it's costing me life. You're not spamming command Valak enough. Don't just press it once. I basically, because I'm on controller, right, it's R2, I'm holding it down the entire tower run. I don't let go of it. So I would do the same on mouse and keyboard. I'd have that button, it's annoying probably, but I'd have that button pressed down all the time. Next we have the Dark Prison, which has a lot of purposes, but it's also an occult and hellfire, so it triggers all those damage buffs for us. It's also a great defensive option because everything outside coming into me has 45%, I believe it is, damage reduction, as well as everything within is slowed and weakened, so damage reduction depending on if they're a normal elite or a boss. So it's very important there to have that up. And again, you can, when the power within triggers, you can, let's get one going, you can spam it, right? You don't need to, there's no point to spam it, but you can reset it. So you basically have it up all the time unless you forget to push it, but if you do, you've just lost damage, right? Because you don't have the 14% from having an occult skill up every 20 seconds. So yeah, this one you have 100% uptime on, and it's a great way to keep fortify up as well. Sigil or Subversion is one of the more important skills, and that's the one that why we moved with the boots, the footfalls, which moves our nether step over to our evade. We freed up space for Sigil or Subversion, which is super important. Again, I've said in a previous video, it double dips in damage. So it's an occult and a hellfire, fantastic. But it's also enabling us to use the strongest aspect basically in the game from my perspective, the critical strike chance hex. So when enemies are hexed, and Sigil or Subversion hexes enemies, as you can tell by the indicator above, it has 3 levels. You're looking to have it at pink, which means now that enemy is taking 60% extra crit chance from me. So like I have 40%, add on that 60, they're at 100. So every attack I do is now 100% crit chance on them. And again, that one is another one you can spam when power within occurs, and I do that. So every time I get a new power within, I basically triple cast that very quickly on whichever enemies I'm fighting, and then go on with casting my Apocalypse and my Umbrals. And I keep refreshing that all the time so that they're always at 100% crit chance and massive damage. Why I say this is the best, and I've seen this come up in some Reddit posts actually about why is this used, why is that important. Crit chance is very difficult to get this season after they removed it from Starless and Era Perdition, and also those are not useful anymore. It's hard to get to 100% crit for starters. So without this, I basically would have no chance to get to 100% crit chance. Secondly, crit is, the value of it is really high. And what I mean by that is that, look, you can see on this ring, I've got 7.5% crit chance from a GA, right? But I had 29% crit strike multiplier. So I did some sort of basic math, not on this one specifically, but if you took a normal base ring, which can have 5% crit, and it can have up to 30 something or 29%, whatever it was, 25% crit damage, that equated to 60 crit equals 300% crit strike damage multiplier. Now, if there was an aspect that said add 300% crit strike damage multiplier, 300%, we'd be like, oh my god, that's the best ever, let's take that. So obviously having a 60% crit strike when we already don't have many places to get crit is super valuable, and it's super strong, and a lot of builds will be using it regardless of which class they're playing. Or build, sorry. Lastly, Apocalypse, and of course that's the big one that does 98% of our damage, 99% maybe, and that one's obviously also a cult and Hellfire. There was one last point that I didn't talk about, and I have talked about it a couple of times. You can get plus Hellfire plus Occult on your charms. Plus Occult is slightly better because it impacts the Wrath regeneration on our command Valak. So as you can see, it says 430% there. If I take off this Occult, now it's at 385%. Nothing else changed, just the Wrath regeneration. So it is important to try to get Occult, especially if you're going to use the Lucian Helm, because that was really Wrath hungry, and we need that, that huge Wrath regeneration increase that we get. If I take off all these Occult ones that I have, it drops down to 200 something. So it's a huge increase on Wrath regeneration just to make life easier for us. The last part being there, as I talked about just briefly, the Nether Step is on the Evade. We need Nether Step. It's a massive damage reduction. It's our most important skill, basically. We use the 60% damage reduction. With the Footfalls, I was able to move it over to here, and it still counts as an Occult skill. So by doing this, I actually have 5 Occult skills on the bar, plus this one. So I was able to get 6 Occult for this 14%, which gives me an 84% damage increase off this ring, which there is no other aspect that you can put on to rings that will come close to 84%. You'll get 65%. Maybe if you really stack a lot of fire resistance, you can get maybe 68, 69% from one of the other aspects. But yeah, this one is by far the best. It just means you have to be keeping up your Occult skills. It's 20 seconds, so if you haven't cast, say, your Nether Step in 20 seconds, you will see your stack drop down to 5 or one of the others, but generally it's pretty easy to keep them all up natively because you're basically casting all this. You want to keep your Dark Prison up, you want to be triple hexing stuff, you want to be spamming your command Valak, as I said, your casting number will change, so it's not difficult. The only place really I've ever dropped is when I haven't needed to evade in or Nether Step in 20 seconds, and that's where I might lose it. As well as Nether Step is a little bit annoying on here. You can't really pinpoint where you go. It acts as an evade, so as you can see, it always goes this distance. I can't just pick close. So when I'm facing an enemy, what I typically like to do, such as the boss, is position myself so that when I do evade, I'm going to evade into a wall and not be too far away, compared to if I'm fighting the boss here and I evade, I'm all the way over here and I have to run back to him to fight him, right? So of course I'll do it from here, and then I don't have that far to go. It's about the positioning of it. Okay, so next I want to talk a little bit about the Paragon board. I briefly touched on that. I changed a few things and I made it much more damage heavy. This is the absolute highest damage I can get this board, which I won't go into specific details here. I'll touch on a few little things. You can look at the board in the planner that I'll have in the description, but I've tested at least 10 different variations, added up all the different additive amounts and compared them to figure out what is the absolute most damage I can get out of these boards, and this is it. There is not a stronger version. There's no damage reduction now. There's no greater hex or anything like that. I've tried Wrath in the build. Don't get confused by the misleading crit damage that comes up when I have the Wrath. This is like 4,500. That's not accurate in any way whatsoever. You have to hover over it and see the additional. You have 135%. When I use the Wrath, it says you have 400 and something percent or whatever. That's actually accurate, but we lose a lot of damage in other places. Even the glyph itself has less damage than others, as well as we lose a lot on Volatile and Hellfire. So this is the strongest. In the build link, I'm not going to necessarily go, I'll put up 2 versions. I'm going to have the damage version for in-game pushing, and if you want to use that strongest damage version, and then I'll have the general one, which still uses greater hex and has the 25% damage reduction, and that one still does, it's not far off on damage. It's maybe a loss of about 10 or 12% damage in total, but you gain a lot in damage reduction. I think that one's great for most people who are playing the game who are not at the highest level of tower pushing. So I have both of those versions available for you to have a look at and to play with. But again, yeah, this is basically it. I won't go into too much detail here. It's kind of boring when people go through Paragon boards. My eyes usually glaze over and I'm not following along. It's better to just look at it on the planner. If anybody has any specific questions, please feel free to write to me in the comments. One thing you'll notice if you ever look at my videos, I reply to literally everybody. I'm hoping to keep that up. I'm getting more and more subscribers, but yeah, write any questions you have and I'll answer it. I want to talk also about stats and breakpoints. Like I said a little bit earlier, I haven't done an attack speed breakpoint for Umbral Chains and for Apocalypse and everything. I think that's just a lot of work to figure out. Is 96% the stop point, and there's no more value in getting 97% or 98% attack speed? I'm not going to do that. I did that basic testing and it showed me that I still was getting improvement from 75 to 100%, a good 20% improvement. So I think it's valuable to go all the way to the end. How the stat should be, of course, is you're aiming to get 40% crit and 100% attack speed. If I was new and I was coming in and I wanted to figure out how to do this, I would be focusing first on getting to 20% crit strike chance. 20% crit strike chance. Ignore the attack speed for now. You'll get that natively from some places such as the World Breaker, which has it on there. 20%, because then you add that to your 60 and you have a good base of 80% crit strike. Once I've got to the 20, then I would switch over to now trying to get to at least 75 attack speed. So then I would get to 75 attack speed, which you can do from having it as your weapon, temper, or anywhere else. The rings, as I've said in a previous video, attack speed is overvalued on these rings, so it's a really great place to stack up. Don't stack too much of it onto your gloves and your amulet, because it's not as it's equally valued there, but on the rings is a great place to have it. And of course as a temper if you need it here. So I'd get 20% crit, 75% attack speed, and then it's up to you on which way do you want to go. Do you want to finish out that 100% attack speed first, or do you want to boost up your crit strike? Those are going to be quite equal. But again, the end goal being get to 100% attack, 40% crit. I'm a little overvalued here. As far as life, again, that's something I haven't really covered on before, but I'm at 56,000. I feel like that's pretty good. I wouldn't like less than 50,000 life, but I also understand it can be difficult to get to that when you're starting out, so don't focus on it. It's really only valuable for a really high level tower pushing to have over 50,000. And people probably haven't looked at these stats before, but my toughness level, you'll see I have the lightning gem, the fire, and the physical. I feel like these are the most likely ones that are causing me problems in the tower. Cold and poison. Poison is very low, so if I stand in anything, my life drops quick, but it's usually easier to avoid. And also if I want to get the damage buff from Mephis set, I can quickly dip into a pool and then quickly back out. It's a little bit harder to do that with lightning. When they're just spamming lightning in your face, it's harder for you to just avoid it if I had low. So yeah, I have low. If you're not doing tower pushing, I think it's absolutely fine to use diamonds here, right? Just even these out. That's absolutely totally cool and probably preferred way to do it. It's only when you get to that really high level stuff that you're trying to sort of gamble on, I'm going to have more trouble with fire and lightning and physical than I am going to have with cold and poison. Yeah. For the rotation, I'm going to now go through how I approach starting a fight and how I approach it throughout the fight, of what I have to do to maintain the most damage and to take the least damage and not die. So this question comes up a lot of, oh, I didn't know what to do with bombardment. How do we do it? When do we do that? I usually start with bombardment, right? So I'm trying to get up to the 5 stack and before I even get into a fight. And so you want to be getting your bombardment up so that one, you have the 105% increase here. And also when you get to the enemy, you're already pelting them with demons, and you're stacking up the demonic spickles damage buff against them. As well as if you're not at 100% on the sadism, you're building that up as well. So I would come in here, I'm building up the bombardment on them. Then I would be throwing an Umbral Chains. I'd be using my Dark Prison. I'd be casting Hex on them, or the Sigil of Subversion. You can see now it's at triple Hex. I'm holding down Command Valak, and then I will start Apocalypse, right? And so after that, I'm holding down Umbral and Apocalypse at the same time, basically. And as you can see, spamming Umbral and I'm spamming Apocalypse, and it's shooting out the nukes every half a second or so. I will alternate between doing Umbral and then X, building up a couple of stacks, making sure I try to keep at the 5 stack on the bombardment, just so I know if any new enemies get sucked in towards me, they're immediately building up their own demonic spickles damage increase against them, right, for me. So it's pretty simple. Demonic spickles before I get in, Nether Step usually over to them, Dark Prison, make sure that's up, Hex them, Command Valak, Umbral Chains, and spamming Apocalypse. I don't focus on building up to 100 Apocalypse stacks. I focus more on I need to get to 20 stacks with the Scepter. And I haven't talked about that much in this video. I've talked about it previously a lot about the Scepter. So if you're new to this, you're going to have to build up 20 stacks, and that's why we use the Wolves rune, because the Wolves build up your stack very quickly. As you can see, if I shoot off here, this is the one you're looking at, the increased damage, and it's a 260% damage increase when I have 20. If I cast this, it drops off after a couple of seconds. Now it's gone. You can see the Wolves build it back up to 20 on their own. I'm not even hitting them in 1 second or so. So that's why we use the Wolves, because only for that reason alone. If I didn't have Wolves, it takes me 8 to 10 seconds to build up the 20 stack. That's even with having 100% attack speed. It's still going to take me 8 to 10 seconds to build up. And it's the single biggest reason or downside to using Scepter, because when you die in the pit, you lose all your wolves. It takes about a good 10 seconds for your wolves to get back up to 6 wolves. And so you're usually waiting a little bit after every death before you go back into the fight to build back up to 20 stacks. And so that's you really need to not die on any sort of tower push as much as possible, because 1, you're losing time off the actual timer, and 2, you're losing time because you have to wait to build up to 20 stacks again. Because of course I don't sit around waiting for the wolves. I go in and I start attacking, but I can't use my ultimate, which starts the whole chain of everything that creates power within, that sort of gives me wrath regenerate. It's everything. I can't do that until I have 20 stacks. Okay, so that's the rotation. One thing I do want to talk about, and you'll see in the plan, is that I now have 2 versions. I have what is the T1 to T12 and onwards version, and I have the endgame version, which is basically what I've showed you a bit today. Full endgame, once you're fighting bosses, this is the best gear to have once you want to do the higher content. But of course, when you're first hit level 70, and you want to build up, things can be a little different. You don't need to use the Scepter, and if anything, it's a little bit more challenging to use it and to do good damage. So I would recommend what I previously had in the old video is just a normal 2-hander with the Heresy on that 2-hander. It's 28% damage. You can get 6 occult skill stacks off that, so it's 168% damage off this. You could also use the Grandfather. I didn't ever mention it in the previous videos because when I made that one, the Grandfather was very difficult to get. But if you get a good Grandfather, yeah, go ahead and use that. I would probably lean into its crit strike chance on that and, temper a crit strike, and then remove the Calamity Ring and have something else on here, another aspect on here instead of the Hex. But yeah, you can definitely use the Grandfather. That question has come up a lot. If you do use the Grandfather, then you would still keep the Heresy on the ring. But if you use the Heresy 2-handed axe, so for your earlier builds, then you would use a ring with Cremators on it or Ignition. So it's a smaller damage increase. It's a 65% compared to an 84%. So in general, this is a lower damage build, but it's easier to get, and it's easier if you're trying to learn the build, because if you don't get routinely to the 20 stacks of the scepter weapon, it's less of a damage loss. So what I mean by that is, if you only running around and you only get to 2 stacks before, and now you keep that 2 stacks for a long time, you've lost a lot of damage. Whereas if you do that with this build, which you would use the 2-hand scepter with heresy, the Cremator's ring, and then you would use a I don't have it here, but the charm that has, you know, the scepter on it. This one, not that one even. This one. So you'd use this because it's the strongest charm we have. So if you don't have it as a weapon, you use it as the charm. You would be using that, and if you didn't have 20 stacks, you've lost less damage compared to if you'd used the scepter. So this is a very viable option, and a lot of people can use it. I think I even got to 140 tower using this setup. So you can definitely do very well with it. It's not like, oh my god, you do you know, significantly less damage that you can't even do anything with it. You can. But if you want to start doing the highest end, then you would switch over to using Scepter full time and Heresy on the ring. And then the 5 set bonus. So yeah, if you're new, check out that variant and build up towards that first. So of course, everybody asks what's important. You want to get the gloves. The build doesn't start to gloves. So as soon as I hit level 70, I would then be farming for the Worldbreaker gloves, which drops off Grigor. And once I've got one of them, that's good. Then you can start playing Apocalypse. I would switch over fully to Apocalypse. So until then, I would just play whichever build I had been playing to level, Dreadclaws or whatever. And then I'd start putting together the rest of the pieces. I would try to get a Footfalls, but of course that's not that mandatory. And until you get a Footfalls, you would just not have the Sigil of Subversion. You would have Nether Step over on your bar. Once you get the Footfalls, you can move over Nether Step over to your Evade, and you can put Sigil of Subversion here and start building towards the end game build. But yeah, hopefully that helps. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about, well, what's next? Because this is 2.0. Is this the end? For myself, I still have a few places where I can gain considerable damage. I'm going to be trying to, in the next few weeks, get a very good seal. I know now that they've just allowed us to combine 3 seals and put them into one. I had 12. I went through all of them and merged them and didn't get anything good. So now I have basically none again. So I have to be farming for those, but I can get a 20% or a 25% damage increase just from having a better seal. And I'm also cooking up some build with Blood Mad Talisman or Amulet, and also Azure Wrath. I've seen some builds playing around with these. I've done some basic testing, especially on the Blood Mad. It is crazy damage, but it's very difficult to sustain life and to live and to move from pack to pack. That's the biggest thing. I can usually survive when I'm on some enemies, but then as I'm moving to the next one, I'm still draining life. And because I don't have any, way to really keep that up outside of combat, it just drains away and I die, right? Even when I try a weapon with life on hit, it's great for when I'm fighting, but when I'm not fighting, I still die. So I'm going to be cooking around with that, because if I can get it working, maybe it's even better than using the Memphis set. Same with Azure Wrath. I may try it with an offhand and see if that ends up being anything. It may not, but you will see a video if I do uncover something super strong here that will push us to maybe even 150. And yeah, I might even try a 150 pit and put a video up in the next week or so. I think I could probably get there now with the current gear that I have. Let's see. Thanks for watching if you've got all this way through. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. I will reply to everything. And yeah, Warlock, let's go. I want to see more Apocalypse. Surely next reset, the top few builds on both sides are going to be Apocalypse. I can see that on the normal board, so not jump to me, on the normal board, teammate was using my build, so that's great to see. I expect there to be more of this, essentially, because it really is going to be the easiest way to push up and get the highest. Thanks for watching.